Welcome guys, and thank you for joining us on this week's video tutorial. Today I'm going to be covering our range of Elbe ready to fish rigs and giving you all a brief description of each rig, where it can be fished, what tackle to be used on each rig, baits to be used with those rigs, and where one could actually use those rigs. I'm going to cover a little on each trace. Obviously we've got a large range, and I'll do my level best. If there's anything that you would think of after the video, if you have any questions, you're most welcome to contact me, and yeah, I'll assist wherever I can. Elbe's range obviously is going to be going through a new packaging. This is my first video on a GoPro, so please excuse me filming myself. Elbe's range is going to be going through a new packaging. Obviously, once they sell out the existing stock, the packaging is going to change into this funky and smart and elegant new design. Okay, so let's begin. To begin, I'm going to be covering all the floats that we do stock. The first float is the small soft floats. We generally use these with our bronze brim traces, blacktail traces. So it's mostly your size 1 hooks, fishing in the gullies in between rocks, and you would attach this generally between your hook link and your hook and your swivel, and we try to push it on the eye of the hook or just above that. And what this actually does is it generally keeps the bait afloat, or gives it a bit more movement with the water currents. It also aids in assisting guys from not getting snagged. And how it does that is, when the peckers actually feed onto your bait and finish your bait, your hook generally sits on the bottom of a rock, and with the current washing, we generally get snagged. So this actually picks the hook up, and that actually helps. So that's one of the floats over there. Okay, so we sell this flotation pad, or you could say a pre-cut out flotation pad. And what this actually does is made out of a firm or high density foam, and it just pops off like that, if you can see that. I'm not going to actually open each one because there's a lot here, but I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of what we can do with these. So generally this year you would use on a ready-made dingle that doesn't have flotation, you would use this just halfway onto your hook, going onto your line, and you would bind it tight with cotton, and you would build your bait over that. And what this actually does is it also picks up the bait slightly off the floor, and with the current you get more movement. Color doesn't really matter, it's more the quality or the density of the foam. Okay, so we're covering some shad floats. The Elbe's range of shad floats come ready to fish, so that means it has a hole that goes through each float, so the guys can thread through their line or their steel, etc., and use it. We cover white and red in hard. The white generally is for guys that are actually fishing in the mornings before sunrise and after sunset. So that's the white, and the red is generally after sunrise and before sunset. These are hard corks, gives you much more flotation than your softer corks, and this is a firm favorite along our entire coastline. We do also keep the softer ones. It's for guys that wanting to fish the same before or after sunrise, and obviously with this here you won't get as much flotation compared to the harder ones. Okay, moving over to our sabikis. Our sabikis are very well priced in the market. They're super strong, very good quality. We've used them extensively off the boats, off the backline of deep sea. The hooks are of good quality, the lines are of good quality, and they do catch fish. We got them in 2 sizes, a size 4 and a size 6. And I kid you not, we've caught a lot of decent sized fish when we're targeting bait fish. What you generally do with these here is, on one end you'll have a loop, and in the other end you'll have a loop. Here you'll tie your main line, and the other end you'll slot in a sinker. Or, as Lionel's taught me, you can slot in a spoon or a jig, and believe me, you catch fish on the jig as well. So yeah, that's our sabikis. Generally used to catch a variety of bait fish off the boats, paddle skis, jet skis, anything from red eye, sugar mackerel. We've also got small bonitos on them, believe you or not. We've also got some sand soldiers, etc. on them as well. So yeah, check them out. They do have these small green beads here. You can charge green beads with a headlight, but it's not necessary. If you want to add more attractant to your hooks, you can put a small piece of squid. So that's our sabikis, guys. Okay, moving over to our shad range. We have a huge shad range. I'm going to just briefly cover each packet and explain to you all what each packet is for, what each trace is for. To start off, you'll notice that all our shad traces generally have red or white or soft and hard. And how you'll determine that is the hard, it speaks for itself. It's a hard cork in red or white. I've explained earlier which you'll use when. And then the softer is just soft foam. Right, to begin with, the first four, which is this four, they come with a cork. They come with a hook that has a piece of steel to it. So generally it's a one hook with a steel and a float. This is for guys that are actually wanting to buy these and actually make their own traces. So they're going to put a line through the cork, they're going to tie it to the swivel, and then they're going to obviously tie a sinker on the other end, etc. So these are not fully kitted. It's for guys in between that obviously know how to make a trace and they want to just buy a couple, and then if anything has to happen on the beach, they can make extra. So there's four here, two soft, two hard, and both obviously you'll have to rig up. Right, moving over to our ready rigs. Okay, so these here, you get a soft and a hard. I don't see the white here. I'm not too sure if we do. So generally what happens here is the guys that want to fish, all they need to do here is attach their sinker, put their bait on and cast. It's as simple as that. It comes with the line ready, tied to the rig, and the float obviously in between the line. So the guys just need to put their, attach their main line, attach a line with their sinker, and they're ready to fish. Okay, moving over to our bulk packs. How our bulk packs work, it's 3 per packet. It comes in a soft 3 or a hard 3. Both of them have their hooks with steel and a swivel. Here again, the guys that are going out that want to have a backup or want to make traces at home, they can buy these. They will attach their line to their trace, push the float through, and then obviously attach another line with a swivel and the sinker. So these are not fully rigged, but can be rigged by anglers on the beach or at home. Comes in a soft and a hard, and these are single hook. For guys wanting extra assurance, and a lot of guys do fish with a double hook, and the reason for that is obviously one hook faces left and one hook faces right on a larger sardine, is the exact same bulk packs, but obviously these bulk packs come with a double hook. So there's 3 double hooks, 3 soft floats or 3 hard floats, and the guys can rig it on the beach or at home. So that's covering our shad traces in a nutshell. And obviously I'm going to be moving over to our traces for shore and offshore. I'll give you all a brief description of each trace, what tackle one can use with it, and yeah, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm going to start from the smallest to the biggest, and the first trace in our range is the pinky trace, as you can see. Okay, so here generally a pinky is a very small fish, predominantly on the east coast of South Africa. It's a shore species, so you can fish from the rock, from the surf with it. Very small mouths, if you can see here. So the hooks are quite tiny. They're relatively close to the rocks or the surf. Generally guys catch them to use them for live baits, etc. You can use sardine, you can use a small squid. They're not too fussy. They used to be in large shoals, but obviously over the years the numbers have dwindled drastically. No rocket science to fish for this species. Early mornings, evenings, or during the day if they're stuck in over a bank, obviously in a rock pool. So to start off, we have a single trace. It's ready to fish. All you need to do is put a bait on. Comes with a 3-way swivel, a small hook, and a tiny sinker. This trace generally you'll gully fish with because of the size of the sinker. You'd use a 7-8 foot rod, very light braid, 10-pound braid, or even 5-pound line if you're using. The other trace, it's three traces, 2 hooks in each trace. So on this trace, you'll attach your main line on one end and you're going to attach a sinker on the other end. Suggestion to the guys fishing with these traces here is ideally to use a pear type sinker, size 1 ounce, 2 ounce maximum. Very light, so you feel the bite and you land your fish faster. Yeah, so that's it about pinkies. You don't get them much in the Eastern Cape heading towards Cape, so it's predominantly more in the KZN area. Moving over to our quarantine traces, you'll notice there's a short description. So the guys that are actually buying these traces can ascertain where to fish for them, what to fish with, and a little about the species. So in a nutshell, the quarantine traces, we have 3 again, 3 traces, double hook traces. So that's actually 6 hooks. You have to attach a sinker to this. Ideally, they love the small bits of sardine. So when I'm fishing for these types of fish in the gullies, predominantly in the gullies, or similarly to pinkies on the shoreline, I try to chum the water with some brown bread and some sardine before I fish, and I get them into the gully and then I knock them shot for shot. So they are shoal fish. They are predominantly on the east coast as well. Guys use them to slide for daga salmon and various other species. You get the odd kingy that does take them, or the odd garrick as well. We're using bait holder hooks, and the reason why we're using bait holder hooks is because, as you would know, a bait holder hooks has notches on the shank. The baits that we use for these types of species are relatively soft. So when you put a sardine onto these hooks, obviously they can come off, or if a pecker grabs them, it can be pulled off. So the bait holder actually holds the bait in position. Okay, that's your quarantine traces. Okay, stone brims. Now, a stone brim predominantly in very reefy areas, rocky areas. Here you would use a 9, 10, 11 foot rod, very small hook, very light hook, and the reason being is of the feeding behaviorisms of this fish. Stone brim, aka stinker fish, it's got its name obviously from the smell, but there's ways of obviously cleaning them so that the smell from the meat actually comes off. In a nutshell, ideally a 2 or 3 ounce, we're going a bit heavier. You're going to be fishing in a heavy wash, therefore the heavier sinker. These fish, guys, you can catch them in 1 meter of water. So look at coming in water, look at white working water that you want to fish in. Try to look for, the key thing that I do when I fish for this type of species is look for lettuce. So it's a green lettuce that actually grows on the rocks. I actually put those lettuce on the hooks and I've caught. And the other ones, you can try a small piece of prawn, crackers, etc. But with these size hooks, I would go with small sardine, lettuce to fish for these. Even rock bait as well works well. And 2 to 3 ounce, 9, 10, 11 foot rods. In the gullies, in the whitewater, stone brim. 3 traces ready made with a 3-way swivel and a small hook. All you need to do is you attach your sinker and you're ready to fish the stone brim. Alright, moving over to blacktails. Now your blacktails, you find them along the whole entire east coast throughout the year, going into Cape Town as well. Our blacktail traces come ready rigged, three traces, 2 hooks per trace with 3-way swivels. All you need to do is tie your sinker, anything from a 1 ounce right up to a 3 ounce, depending on the rod and reel. You can fish with a 8, 9, 10, 11, even a 12 foot rod, a light rod. With a 5,000, 4,000 size reel, you'll get away. You can catch them predominantly in any tide, but ideally on a pushing tide. You can use sardine, you can use prawns, crackers, and rock bait, also choker. So it just depends in the area that you're fishing in on what they're feeding on. And in a nutshell, a very good fighter, a very good tasting fish. And we catch a lot of these. We also use them for live bait, but they are prized table fish, the blacktail. Okay, moving over to one of my favorite species to target, the bronze brim. Okay, so here we've got 3 traces, 2 hooks each. So that's 6 hooks, 6 beads. All you need to do is tie on to your main line and put on a sinker. I generally use a bottle sinker or a pear sinker. And the reason why I use this is the area that you're fishing for bronze bream, you're going to get stuck a lot. So therefore, use a sinker that doesn't get snagged as much. Rods, you can look at anything from a 10 foot going upwards, 10, 11, 12 and a light 13. The reason being is obviously the areas that you're fishing for bronze bream, you do get picked up by mussel cracker. You can get a rock cod in those areas, very reefy areas that are very rich in oxygen. So it's working water. And obviously you get other species that feed in those areas. So you'll notice our hooks are quite strong on these compared to your other traces. Predominantly we use prawns, red prawn. We butterfly the prawn over the hook and we put some thin cotton because they're a bit finicky at times. Some secrets that I'll let you all in is when I'm fishing with these here, I don't actually put any lotion or deodorant on that morning. I don't touch anything that has a strong scent on my hands because when I'm baiting up, these fish can be finicky. Another trick that I'd obviously help you all with regards to catching these, if you catch any that are undersized or that you want to release, do not release them in the pool that you caught them in or the gully. Keep them in another pool, catch the fish that you want for the day or the session, etc. And when you're done, release all of them back. We've noticed when you release a couple in the gully that you're fishing, you spook the shoal and the shoal is gone. There's a flotation bead here, as I've explained earlier on. The reason for the flotation bead is obviously to get some movement on your baits in the water, in the current. Obviously, if your hooks get bare with the fish eating all your baits or pecking your baits off, the flotation does help your hook pick off the rocks and you reduce your chances of getting snagged. This is a must-have. It's one of our biggest sellers, the bronze bream trace on the East Coast. You do get them in the Cape area as well. And please don't confuse this between the copper bream. There's a difference between the bronze bream and the copper bream. Copper bream is more for an offshore species, whilst the bronze bream is a more shore species. You do get its family and relatives in the Cape area. They're not the same fish, but they feed in the similar gullies. The Hottentot, you also get the kalyun, the black bream, which is South Africa's national fish. You can still catch it on these traces. The only thing I would change is changing the prawn over to rock bait. So that's the bronze bream traces. Moving over to our grunter traces. So from an outset, we've got 3 traces in each. A single hook for this type of fishing or this species. Ideally, if you're fishing for this type of fish, you can use this trace in the estuaries, you can use it in the harbor, and you can use it on the surf. A very shy feeder. So you notice if you're fishing in estuaries, you'll go with the bait holder hook, a very thin gauge hook. If you're fishing off the surf, you would go with a thicker hook. One of the best baits for this year is cracker prawn or cracker shrimp. They do take prawns occasionally or a sardine belly, but cracker shrimp is the bait to go with these. These traces you generally can use anything from a 8, 9, 10, 11 to a 12 foot light. You can catch steam bass with these, so these ones here would be much better suited because of the gauge of the hook and the strength of the hook. Grunter fishing depends on what time of the year. Obviously, it's not a true season throughout the year. Very good species to target. Remember, shy feeders, the trick that I could lend to you is loose drag or bail arm open if you're fishing in an estuary or harbor. Let him feed and suck that bait in. And when you're confident enough that he's done that and he's taking off, then you'll obviously tighten your drag or close your bail arm and you'll hook your species. The bait holder hook, then again, yeah, is the reason being is obviously because of your notches on the shank. And what this actually does is when you're fishing with a cracker shrimp, it generally actually slips off the hook. So the bait holder actually holds that in place. If you're fishing on the surf for your grunter, you can use a pear sinker again. If you're fishing in the harbor, I suggest you use a running sinker. It's a ball sinker or an egg sinker that actually runs on your main line. And the reason for that is the fish doesn't feel any resistance when it pulls. So if y'all can relate, all the Joburg guys, carp fishing, resistance. Right, moving over to our stump nose. Predominantly, you get it in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. You get the Natal stump nose and you get the Cape stump nose. You'll notice the size of the hook, the thickness of the line, and the swivel. The reason being is these fish fight strong. you would need to cast in areas that are generally quite far onto the banks and they can reef you. You need to tackle up, so obviously anything above 11 foot, so a 12 foot light, medium, 13 foot light, even a 14 foot light. I would also increase the ounce rating of my sinkers, so anything between 4, 5, 6 ounce. If you're fishing on the surf and there's a wash, you would use a weed eater sinker. And the reason for this is if it gets stuck in the rock, it'll bend open and you will get your sinker back. If you're fishing in a heavy wash, you would use a proper grapnel. So stump nose, we generally use a kennel round. The reason why we use a kennel round is its strength, its lightness, and its sharpness. It's not a beaked hook, it's a straight point hook. We generally use baits such as a sardine head, a red eye head. Sea lice is one of my favorite best baits. I fish on a pushing tide on the banks or a incoming or outgoing on the turn. Whole sea lice back to back on these hooks is a winner. Guys generally also use cracker shrimps. They put a 3-4 cracker shrimps on the shank of the hook, tie them up, and they're ready to fish. Okay, cob salmon. We've got 3 traces in our cob packets. You'll notice most of our packets have 3 traces, guys, and this is one of our selling points, is that for the price and for what you're getting, it's decent stuff and we're offering much more than the competitors out there. So in a nutshell, our cob traces, the hooks will be bigger, swivel bigger, and line bigger. You're targeting anything and everything in between 3 kilos right up to 15 kilos on average with a trace of this size. You can use a choker blob bait, which I prefer. Match your bait size to the hook size. You can put a dingle on these hooks if you would like and build your bait on the dingle. Ideally on a trace of this size, I would use a 5 or a 6 ounce sinker. I would use a pair sinker in no wash. I would use a weed grapnel in a wash. I would also use a different sinker, which is a pyramid sinker, and the reason being is these traces are fixed traces. Now what does that mean? It means it has a 3-way swivel and a hook on one end and a sinker on the other end. When that fish grabs the bait and it pulls, the weight of the sinker actually sets the hook to an extent, and then you'll obviously set your hook for that hook to penetrate through. Guys, you can use live baits on these traces if you're casting a bait, but more for the sardine belly with a choker, 2 tentacles jutting out, or you can use choker with a blob or build a nice bait over these hooks. These fish generally, I prefer fishing closer to a river mouth. In the KZN and Cape, you get a lot of these species, so it covers our entire eastern and southern coastline, right up to Namibia. Obviously, depending on the area, your sinker weights and your rods would differ because of the distances you need to cast to get to them. When fishing in closer to a river, I prefer using natural baits in that area, so I would change my bait over to mullet. If there's peckers in the area, I'll build choker over that. Yeah, and that's in a nutshell our salmon or cob kabeljau traces. Use 14, 13 foot rods on that. Okay, garrick traces. A firm favorite along our coast, especially during the run, predominantly on the KZN coast from the Eastern Cape going up to Richards Bay. We've got 2 types in our range. This package here comes with 2 traces. Both are doubled hook, and the reason for the double hook, these are live bait traces, guys. You can use a dead bait, but I highly doubt that it's effective. You might get a bite once in a while. So your double hook traces, generally this is more for your casting guys. Guys want to drop with a drone for garrick in the behind the breakers. You can use a live shad, live blacktail, Live mullet works very well, especially closer to your estuaries and rivers that run into the water, into the ocean. So this is only your rig. You still have to have a sinker with a swivel that you will rig on. The sizes of the hook will obviously determine the sizes of the bait that you're using. If you have a small bait, then you have to downsize your hooks. So please note when you're selling this, that these hooks would obviously suit a certain size of live bait. And the reason why that is, if you want to know, is because the size of the hook actually reduces, if it's a bigger hook, it reduces the lifespan of that live bait in the water. Okay, the other in our range is a single ready to fish rigged slide trace. Now the slide trace comprises of a slide in the bottom. If you'd have a look, it comprises of a sinker on that slide, which I will explain to you shortly, and it has a line attached to the slide itself with two hooks. As explained earlier on, the two hooks is where you would put your live bait. It also has a ring. If you can see that there's a ring, a loose ring. So what you generally do with a trace of this nature is, when you go to the beach and you find the area that you want to fish on, obviously an opening between banks, etc., is you would take that ring, you would attach a piece of line to it and a sinker, and then on the other end you would attach your main line. You would cast your sinker as far as you can, or in the area that you want to fish. You will sit your sinker down. I prefer using one of these two. The ounce rating of the sinker will vary depending on the wash. Preferably a 13-foot to a 14-foot rod, medium heavy, because you do get picked up by bigger cob and other species as well, kingfish, etc. Once your sinker, you're confident that your sinker is actually sitting in the ground, that is when you would take this slide with your two hooks. You would rig your live bait that was in a pool or was in a bucket that you caught prior, and then you will attach your spring onto your main line and you'll clip it, and then you'll slide your live bait down. And obviously that's a whole new technique, or to most guys, or it's a technique that does take time to learn. But so once that technique you get into place, you keep on sliding the rod or jerking the rod with each wave, and it goes further and further until it reaches that sinker, or obviously you can't get a pickup before that. The reason why we have a sinker here attached to that, or a ball or a weight on that slide, is it actually bends the slide when the wave pushes the bait back. And by doing so, it actually doesn't pull or allow the slide to get washed out. So it only can go one way. So that is the reason why we have that. Okay, we have a general multi-purpose recreational rig. This is obviously for the guys that are just coming down for a holiday or trying out fishing, etc. You can hook your stumpy, you can hook a small salmon, you can hook a small brusher, you can hook a small skate. It's a multi-purpose entry-level trace. All you need to do is attach a swivel on one end and your main line on the other end. You can use a variety of rods on this, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The hook is quite large, so look at a bigger bait, sardine belly, choker, a red eye, or a blob of squid on these traces. Okay, moving over to our bottom rig. Our bottom rig comes in a single rig. It's ready to be fished with 3 hooks, 2 smaller hooks, and 1 larger hook. So this is predominantly used on the guys fishing on paddle skis, jet skis, and bottom fishing of the boats. This looks like a medium to a medium heavy rig. So obviously you can fish for redfish, rock cods, lanterns, Englishmen, trolling soldiers, a variety of reef species offshore. Your bottom hook is generally where you will use a flapper or a head or a bigger piece of a bait. Your top hooks is where you'd use a choker strip, a squid strip to get a smaller species. You would attach your main line to one end of the swivel, and on the other end you would attach a sinker. Types of sinkers that you would use on this rig are quite heavy depending on the current. It's generally this shape or straight down shape. I generally fish 60 to 120 meters. I go with the 8 going right up to 15, 16 ounce depending on the current. Reason for that is obviously you need to get the rig as fast down as possible before the current pulls. Fish with a KP, ideally 8 foot rod, give or take, and yeah, that's it. Okay, moving over to our shark trace. This is a multi-purpose trace for shark and skates. Please guys, this is not a heavy duty or a heavy trace. It's a medium or a light trace. So don't try to sell it as a drone trace or a Mazeppa special trape or a trace or PE. You're gonna get broken off or bust off. So this is a multi-purpose trace that a guy just starting off shark fishing, skate fishing, that just wants to go and try it out, have a cast bait out there with a small fillet. You can use choka, you can use sugar mackerel, shad fillet on this hook, and you can target a variety of blue rays, diamonds, small grays, hounds, cow sharks, etc. You can use it in the Cape, you can use it in KZN. It's a light trace. We need to sell it as that, and it will sell. Lastly, we have a sliding rig for sharks as well. This is a bit heavier if you notice the hook versus the other. So this here will work exactly like your Garrick traces, where you'll cast off your sinker using the split, the ring that's provided. You would set your sinker. Generally we'd use a sinker like that so it grips quite well. You would rig up your bait, it's a double hook, and then obviously you'll slide that with a technique. Thank you guys for watching. I tried to keep it as short as possible. Obviously there's a lot here and I didn't want to go in depth into each trace or each species. It was my first video on GoPro, so hopefully the voice and my face is in it. Yeah, and if you have any questions regarding any trace, please do give me a call. I'll try my level best to assist you all. And yeah, thanks for watching guys, and stay tuned for more videos. Cheers guys.